Welcome back! Today we are looking at the process for me drawing a very cute little drawing with lots of little duckies, and they're so cute and they have their big heads and stuff. And yeah, I've just jumped straight into it, no intro or anything here because that's how I do it, I guess. And here I'm just using a pencil-like brush that I've made that is available in my Yummy Pencils pencil pack, brush pack. And I'm using it for the line art in this because I wanted a more natural feel than my usual line art brush from the Crunchy Lines pack. And yeah, I'm just adding more stuff, little flowers, little bugs, little duckies, and just drawing the outlines for everything. That's usually what I start with, just outlining everything, drawing the lines and stuff like that. And here I'm drawing a little dragonfly. I love drawing them, they're so fun. And adding the little like antenna and stuff makes them so cute. And big wings. I have quite a lot of line stabilization on when I'm drawing like this. I saw someone on Instagram actually like complimented me on my line like control, and I'm like, yeah, it's not real. I usually always have the line stabilization quite high, either in the brush settings or in the like Procreate wide settings, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you have to have the brush stabilization on as well, I think you should. Like, if it makes it easier and more fun for you to draw, it's always a good idea. And here my camera is kind of struggling to focus, but it's okay. This way is actually so fun because I just kind of doodle digitally and just make whatever I want. And this time I was actually paraphrasing or like interpreting one of my old drawings, which I'll show on screen maybe. And yeah, it was an old drawing with like this vibrant green background and these orange flowers and these cute little duckies, and I just liked that piece so much, so I wanted to make a similar one again. And I made some changes. I changed up the brush, for example, for this pencil-like brush from the pencil pack, and I really like how it works as line art because it's a bit more even than the jittery brush I usually use for line art, but it still has a lot of texture, and you know I love texture. If you know anything about my art, it's that I love texture. I can't live without texture. I always use like texture overlays, textured brushes and stuff like that. I know I see a lot of people being like, digital artists being like, yeah, the hard round brush is the best always, and I'm like, but what about all my fun brushes? I love them so much. I have so many brushes in Procreate, both my own that I've made myself and like ones that I've bought through the years. I love the Max Pack ones and the Shrill Art ones, especially. Yeah, they're so good. And here I'm struggling a lot with drawing a round head. It's kind of hard to get that like wonky shape, the right kind of wonky, if you know what I mean. It's so odd, like I always find that kind of interesting with like simple wonky shapes, is that it can look wonky, but if it looks wonky in the wrong way, then I don't like it. It's got to be wonky in the right way. Like that beak, it's not wonky in the right way, it just looks wonky. And it's got to be wonky and cute, and I have to like redo the same thing over and over and over and over again sometimes because I just can't get the shape right. Here I think I wanted the beak to be like a bit more from the front, and I ended up actually drawing this shape quicker, like making a faster movement overall, and that was my favorite in the end, because that like a problem I was having was that it all turned out like a bit too shaky in the lines, and that's not what I want. And here I'm just adding some eyes on the little ducky. I love making the like a bit elongated circles for eyes. I used to always make them like perfectly round, and nowadays I always make those little like lines, and I think they just make for such a cute expression in a drawing of a little creature or a bird or something. I don't know what it is, but I can't like, if I see or if I try to like draw it myself with like the perfectly round dot eyes, I just think they look so like vacant and empty. And I don't know, it's so interesting how that like small difference makes such a big difference in how the expression turns out. And I find that with like faces in general, that like it's interesting because such minor changes affect how it's read and how it's like perceived so much. And I find that absolutely wild. And yeah, I'm just adding little shadows, and then I'm changing my mind about the shadows. I love this pencil brush because it has like some texture when you press down really lightly. It makes that like really grainy pencil texture, and it's really nice. And then I just gotta move it over. I know there are some like things about moving things in Procreate that they lose quality, but I find if it's a high enough res file and I have a texture overlay, it doesn't really matter for me. I've never, like, if I look closely at 100% zoom or something at the end of a piece, it doesn't, unless I have changed or like enlarged something a lot, it's usually not a problem for me. But yeah, that's up to each of their own, I guess. And here I'm adding some more flowers. Flowers are my favorite thing to draw, as maybe you all know, and especially these like simple childlike flowers with these little lines towards the middle and just like a little stem. And also I'm such a sucker for that little shadow underneath a flower stem, or like where the flower is above the stem and you have like a harsh dark shadow just where they meet. I don't know, when I draw a flower and I forget about that part, I'm like so upset because it's my favorite part. Even like those simple egg flowers. Oh my god, I'm shaking so much during drawing this. You gotta be fast sometimes to get the good lines, but it's really hard when you try to draw like parallel lines. And I wanted it to come into the flower at the right spot as well from the middle, so you can see how I traced it there. And yeah, it was basically tricky. I actually filmed this earlier this year, quite in like the summer, I think. And I've had this footage edited for like months and not made a voiceover because I've been tired and stuff. But yeah, here I am doing it finally. And here I'm just adjusting the flower a little bit. I seem to be struggling a lot with the shapes this time. Maybe I always do. Maybe it's just because I'm like looking at my process so like detailed this time that I'm like, why am I doing the same thing over and over and over and over again? It's crazy. And some leaves, and you can see that little dragonfly sitting on the duck's beak. That's actually like a copy from the previous drawing that I made that this is inspired by, because I found that so cute with it like on the nose. I think it was a butterfly in the old one, but like it's still so cute. I love it. Oh, it's a butterfly now. More bugs. Yeah, so I'm just keeping on drawing. I don't know, adding sparkles is like my favorite part of a drawing. Maybe they're so effective at like filling space, adding some magic, adding some whimsy, and you just, whenever I draw something and I haven't added sparkles, it just feels so like lacking for me. And I know it's kind of like a simple trick, and it's used by many artists, but I guess it is for a reason. Like we all love those sparkles and like stars and stuff. And here I'm just like zooming out all the time to see what areas still need more stuff. Like what areas still look empty and stuff like that. Whenever I do this like full pieces with just like stuff scattered all over the page, it's always a lot of zooming out and seeing where I can add another sparkle or a little duck or something to make it more interesting. And zooming out is such a big part of like my process to like tell a composition and see that it looks good. To like see it from afar or like zoomed out, it helps so much. It makes for maybe like less aesthetic process videos, but yeah, it's worth it for the drawing. We're doing this for the art, not for the process video, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. Drawing legs on this little goose, and there's like one goose in this drawing. The others are ducks. I'm very like adamant about which ones are ducks and which ones are geese when I'm drawing birds. And like a lot of people just see them as the same thing in drawings, and I'm like, no, that's obviously a goose. And it's kind of silly, I guess, but like, I don't know, to me it's such a clear like difference between them, even though neither of these look like actual geese or ducks. It's just like my brain categorizes them into those two groups very clearly anyway. Adding more sparkles. We love sparkles. Yay! And then here I'm doing the most important step, which is to set the line art layer as reference in Procreate by tapping it once. And you select the reference, and that means that you can fill in the color in another layer, but it follows the shape of the reference layer. So it is like color filling in the same layer, but you can separate the colors in separate layers, which is really important for my process because I tend to tweak the colors a lot. And for that I need them to be in separate layers so that I can like always or only change this one shade of green at a time, rather than messing up a shade of orange at the same time, which always like trips me up if I've accidentally made them on the same layer. So as you can see here I am on another layer adding this specific shade of orange and accidentally to the entire background because I tapped outside the shapes. And then I just add more colors and just keep filling it in with the color drop tool. I tap like a little button at the top after color dropping once that says like continue filling, which means I can just tap to fill like continuously. And I just keep doing that over and over and over and over again, and just like tapping. And it's kind of satisfying and nice actually. To just see the colors like get filled into the piece and see it like come alive, because I feel like color adds so much to pieces like this, and I think it's so important, and I just love color, so like it's my jam. And here I do something I do a lot, which is open the curves modifier and modify the colors that I'm using to like make them more red or more green or more blue or whatever using the curves, because I found that way easier than like changing the color using the color wheel. I think it's because I used to do a lot of edits in Photoshop for like photographs and stuff, and for that I always used like curves. So it's like my comfort like tool to use to tweak colors, rather than being like, oh, this needs to be slightly more blue, and then I try to pick the color in the oh, my cat has started playing in the color wheel. I find that a lot harder. And so here I wanted to add some color variation to each like flat layer of color. So I open my paint pack, the one that is called like paint exclamation point. And I think I have adjusted sometimes for some copies the color variation for some of them, but I have two sets of that pack, one with color variation and one without. And basically it's a setting in the brush settings that makes it so that each time you lift your pen and make a new stroke, it slightly, or I've set it to slightly, or like 5 or 6% only, change the hue, lightness, and like saturation. I think looks best, those three. And you can actually open it by tapping any brush that you use and going to the like color dynamics, I think it's called, and just like changing it slightly there and adjusting it to whatever you like, so that you can get like easy color variation without having to change the color manually all the time in your color palette or like your color wheel. And here I'm just like upping the saturation a bit of some of the colors because I feel like they're a bit dull compared to the others. And I think I do that to the background as well in the end. Yeah, there I am. Because it looks a bit like too gray compared to everything else. I usually always like up the saturation of stuff towards the end because I just like really bright colors. And here I'm just keeping on painting over with some color variation on the ducks. I usually work very quickly when I do this, as you can see, because I just like tap everywhere to get some like color variation and stuff, because it really adds so much like life and character to the flat shapes, Sometimes I really like the flat shapes with just a texture overlay, but sometimes I really like when they have a more painterly feel inside the pencil line art. It just looks nice. So I'm doing that on the leaves and on the everything. And I'm having my texture overlay usually on when I do this, but sometimes I turn it off to be able to color pick easier, because the texture overlay often changes the color that you color pick. In Procreate you can't select that you color pick only from the active layer or anything like that. It's always from like everything visible. And here you can see me actually inside the color dynamics settings, and you can see it's actually quite high there with like 10% hue, but I think that was too high maybe. It kind of depends on the shade of color that you're using, how high you want that setting, in my opinion. And I have to like go in and change it quite often to see that it actually works for what I'm doing at that moment. You can see here like it's very big difference between the greener parts and the redder parts. And yeah, it's cute, but it's a bit much. And then I just size it down a bit because I want a bit more like air around the edges. And I do, lastly, in every part, I add some chromatic aberration on a copy of all the layers on top of everything. And I set it to lighten. It makes this really cool like retro misprint effect. And here is the finished piece. Thank you so much for watching.